Hey Internet, welcome back to another episode of The Insight.Hour. I hope you had a great weekend. As always, we found some stuff we wanted to talk about with you. So without any further delay, Miss Alice, what are we looking at first?
In an exclusive interview, Joe Biden stated that Ukraine is not yet ready for NATO membership. According to Biden, the ongoing war with Russia needs to end before Ukraine can be considered for inclusion in the alliance. He also mentioned that there is no unanimity within NATO about Ukraine's immediate membership, especially during the ongoing conflict. Biden assured that the U.S. and its NATO allies would continue to provide security and weaponry to Ukraine, similar to the support given to Israel. He also mentioned that Ukraine needs to meet other qualifications, including democratization, before it can be considered for NATO membership. The article also mentions that the U.S. has decided to send Ukraine cluster munitions for the first time to help bolster its ammunition, as it mounts a counteroffensive against Russia. This decision was described by Biden as difficult, but necessary due to Ukraine's dwindling ammunition supplies. In the same interview, Biden expressed optimism about Sweden's potential admission to NATO, despite resistance from Turkey and Hungary. He also discussed other key foreign policy challenges, including China, Saudi Arabia, and Israel. He expressed confidence in establishing a working relationship with China and reiterated his support for a two-state solution in the Israel-Palestine conflict. Regarding Saudi Arabia, Biden stated that the possibility of providing a defense treaty and civilian nuclear capacity, as requested by Riyadh, is still a long way off.
Okay, so we're talking about Ukraine, NATO, and the US. A trio more complicated than the plot of Inception. And just like in the movies, it's all about dreams. Ukraine dreams of joining NATO. NATO dreams of not starting World War III. And I dream of, well, wars ending. So in a recent interview with CNN, President Joe Biden said that Ukraine is not ready for the NATO membership. And you know what? I agree with him. I mean, inviting Ukraine into NATO right now would be like inviting your friend to move in with you while their house is still on fire. It's not about finding a place for all their furniture, it's about putting all those fires out first. Biden also mentioned that there's no unanimous consent within NATO about Ukraine's immediate membership, and that's as surprising as finding out the McRib isn't actually made of ribs. I mean, who could have seen it coming? The US has decided to send Ukraine cluster munitions for the first time, a decision that Biden describes as difficult. And I get it. It's like deciding if you want to give somebody a chainsaw to deal with their termite problem. I mean, sure, it might help in the short term, but probably not best in the long term. Who said that? And then there's Sweden, the ABBA of countries. Everyone likes them, but no one can really agree on their best song. Biden's optimistic about Sweden's potential admission to NATO, despite resistance from Turkey and Hungary. It's like trying to get everybody in your book club to agree on the next book. No, Karen, we're not reading 50 Shades of Grey again. I've had it. But in the end, folks, it's clear that we're dealing with a complex issue here. But one thing is certain, the war needs to end before we start talking any form of membership cards and secret handshakes. Because as we all know, war doesn't solve a damn thing. And we're all going to be left to just clean up the fallout. Now, let's take a look at the world of religious tax evasion, or as I like to call it, holy loopholes.
The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, also known as the Mormon Church, is reducing its use of a controversial shell company following an investigation that revealed its involvement in alleged tax evasion in Australia. The church had established a tax structure in 2012 that allowed its followers in Australia to accumulate tax exemptions worth hundreds of millions of dollars, which are not legally available to followers of other religions. The investigation, conducted in April 2022, suggested that some of the church's tax activities could be in violation of Australian tax laws. Despite the church's repeated claims of compliance with tax laws, it has now begun to dismantle the tax structure. In Australia, the church had ensured the non-tax deductible acts of donating and tithing, the practice in which Mormons pay 10% of their gross income to the church, were routed through a charitable trust to gain 100% tax deductibility.
All right, so now I don't doubt that you've heard of the Mormon Church in Australia, but you might not know that they were recently caught up in a tax evasion scheme that was so out there, it makes Crocodile Dundee look like a documentary. So they've been routing donations and tithing, sorry if I said that wrong, through a charitable trust to gain 100% tax deductibility. That's right, 100%. I don't think I've ever gotten 100% on anything in my life. Oh, that's a depressing thought. Okay. Anyways, I know what you're thinking. Digi, you're in America. Why should you care about anything that's happening over down under? Well, let me tell you, my friends, this isn't just an Australian thing. It's a global thing. It's like when Outback Steakhouse claims to be Australian. It's not really, but it still affects us all. But let me be clear. Top 1%, religious, individual, whatever, they can't continue to evade taxes while the middle class picks up the bill. It's time for the Mormon Church and all religious institutions to pay their fair share. See, we need economic justice. And that includes within our houses of worship. We can't keep standing by while the rich get richer, even if they're doing it in the name of the Lord. So folks, whether you're in the US or in Australia, or anywhere else for that matter, just remember, when it comes to tax evasion, no one's above the law, not even the Almighty, or at least those who claim to speak on his behalf. And now for a new segment we're calling That Moment When! No! Yep, that happened.
And next up we have, the Republican-controlled legislature in Iowa is planning to enact a ban on abortions after approximately 6 weeks of pregnancy during a special session that is set to start today, July 11th. This proposed measure is similar to a 2018 law that was not reinstated by the state Supreme Court last month, leading Republican Governor Kim Reynolds to call for this special session. Currently, abortions are legal in Iowa up to 20 weeks of pregnancy. The current draft of the new bill, which may be amended before a vote, includes exceptions for medical emergencies, rape, incest, and fetal abnormality. Planned Parenthood, the largest abortion provider in the state, has announced plans to protest outside the Iowa Capitol. The organization has previously filed lawsuits to challenge the state's abortion restrictions. The bill is unlikely to face major obstacles in the legislature. In the year since the U.S. Supreme Court reversed its stance on Roe v. Wade, most Republican-led states have significantly curbed abortion access. 14 states have bans with limited exceptions, and one state, Georgia, bans abortion after cardiac activity is detected. Several other states have similar restrictions that are currently on hold pending court rulings. Any restrictions resulting from Iowa's special session are likely to be challenged in court. The question before the Iowa Supreme Court this term was largely procedural, not on the merits of the law. Last year's ruling stated that the undue burden test for abortion law remains in effect unless that legal standard is litigated further, which the court has not addressed since. The undue burden is an intermediate level of scrutiny that requires laws not to create a significant obstacle to abortion. Lawyers for the state argued the law should be analyzed using rational basis review, the lowest level of scrutiny to judge legal challenges.
I swear, it's like they're trying to write instructions on how to time travel back to the 1950s. So, the Republican-controlled legislature is planning to enact a ban on abortions after approximately 6 weeks of pregnancy. 6 weeks! That's less time than it takes for me to decide whether or not to commit to a new Netflix series, people. Now here's the kicker. This ban would come into effect once cardiac activity can be detected, which is typically around 6 weeks of pregnancy. Now, I'm no doctor, but I do have access to Google. And according to the American Pregnancy Association, many women don't even realize they're pregnant until they're 4 to 7 weeks along. So in essence, this law could potentially ban abortions before some women even know they're pregnant. You might as well give out parking tickets to people that are thinking about buying cars. Now, the draft of this bill does include exceptions for medical emergencies, rape, incest, and fetal abnormalities. But I'm not so sure they deserve a pat on the back for doing the bare minimum. The fact that they're even considering this bill is a massive step backwards for women's rights. Now, let's not forget, this isn't just happening in Iowa. In the past year, since the U.S. Supreme Court reversed its stance on Roe v. Wade, most Republican-led states have significantly curbed abortion access. You know, like a national game of who can be the most regressive. And no one seems to want to lose. But here's the thing, restricting access to abortion doesn't stop abortions. It makes them much less safe. According to the World Health Organization, nearly half of all abortions worldwide are unsafe, and these are more likely in countries where abortion is heavily restricted. So instead of trying to control women's bodies and choices, maybe, just maybe, we should focus on providing comprehensive sex education, maybe affordable contraception, probably accessible healthcare. Because at the end of the day, the best way to reduce abortions isn't by banning them, it's by preventing unwanted pregnancies in the first place. But hey, what do I know? I'm just a dude on the internet with a show and like a basic understanding of women's productive rights. Maybe a little about their bodies too. Back to you, Iowa.
An article from The Hill discusses the perceived weaknesses in Florida Governor Ron DeSantis' campaign, which are causing other Republicans, such as Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin and Georgia Governor Brian Kemp, to consider running for president. GOP strategists argue that DeSantis, who was seen as a strong potential challenger to former President Trump, has failed to establish himself as a clear alternative. DeSantis' campaign has been criticized for various missteps, including a problematic campaign launch on Twitter Spaces and a video that was criticized as homophobic. His poll numbers have been sagging, and he blames this on the media. Meanwhile, Trump leads DeSantis by an average of 32 points in recent national polls. Despite this, some believe it's not too late for Youngkin or Kemp to enter the race and win the New Hampshire primary. The article also mentions that Trump's lead could be vulnerable due to his mounting legal problems. This, combined with DeSantis's perceived weaknesses, could make the race more attractive to other potential candidates like Youngkin and Kemp. However, the article also notes that any candidate seeking to win the GOP nomination faces a math problem because Trump is dominating among Tier 1-inch voters who are sure about whom they will support in next year's primary.
All right, so Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, a man that looks like he was born in a Brooks Brothers fitting room, has been stumbling in his campaign. It's like watching a toddler trying to run before they can walk, except the toddler is a grown man and walking is leading the free world. DeSantis, who was once seen as the GOP's golden boy, the diet Trump, if you will, is now struggling to establish himself as a clear alternative to the former president. It's like watching a cover band realize they're not as good as the original, even if the original is Nickelback. Why do you give Nickelback such a hard time? They got some bangers. Anyway, speaking of Nickelback, let's talk about Trump. Despite his legal problems stacking up like pancakes at IHOP, he's still leading DeSantis by an average of 32 points in a recent national poll. It's like losing a foot race to a tortoise, only the tortoise is accused of tax fraud and the hare is, well, Ron DeSantis. Now, other Republicans like Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin and Georgia Governor Brian Kemp are considering jumping into the race. You know, like when your two weird uncles decide to join the family talent show because they think they can do better magic trick than your cousin. Why are there so many governors trying to jump in the race for president? I feel like there's a couple steps along the way you need to hit first, but I mean, I'm just a guy in this little box here, so what do I know? Now here's the kicker. Any candidate seeking to win the GOP nomination faces one massive problem. Math. Because Trump is dominating amongst Tier 1 voters. It's basically like trying to win a pie eating contest when one guy has already eaten all the pies and the rest of the contestants are left fighting over the crumbs. So in conclusion, the GOP search for a presidential candidate is sort of a mess. It's like they're playing musical chairs with Fox News as the music. The chairs are potential candidates and the players are the American voters. The worst part, the game just never seems to end. All right, folks, that's all the news I had for today. Remember, in a world where you can be anything, don't be uninformed. Tune in next time for more news, fun facts, and more of me trying to pronounce difficult names from around the globe. Until then, keep your coffee strong and your Wi-Fi stronger. Digiman out. We're not going to say that. We're not going to go with Digiman out. I'll think of something. I'll think of a sign off eventually. Okay, love you guys. Bye.